This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up? Welcome to Hot Takes, the show where I react to your hot takes. In this video, a ton of takes, a ton of comments. Comment section has been very active over the last week. I think a lot of good faith arguments have been made on a lot of sides of arguments, honestly, in the comment section this week. So let's get into it. First one comes from Mitt. Mitt says this: yeah, the list is great. I really hope we do something and don't go into the season with the Fetty, Hudson, or Adeniji as our backup, because there's nothing I've seen in the preseason that look like they can be solid backups. Now, I agree. The work that we've seen in the preseason has not been something that you feel like would be a great one-to-one translation in the regular season. Now, the one thing to keep in mind whenever we're looking at depth players or what the Browns going to do if they have an injury here or there, we don't usually go back to the preseason to indicate how a player is going to be used or if a player is going to be effective as a backup for a good reason. Because in the preseason, you're not putting that player out there with the understanding that that player needs to be protected. Like Garyon Christian, despite not being better than Jermaine Ifedi, Hakeem Adeniji, James Hudson, looked better at left tackle when he was out there the last 6 weeks of the Browns season and the wild card game. Not because of talent, but because the Browns understood they had a weakness on the offensive line and game planned around that weakness to mitigate it. So even if Jermaine Ifedi is the backup and you don't love what he did in the preseason, or it's James Hudson that is the backup and you don't love what he did in the preseason, they're going to do things to work around those players' weaknesses. The issue you get is when you're trying to work around, like at the end of the last year for the Browns during the playoff game, where you're trying to work around 2 tackles and you're trying to work around a running back's weakness and you're trying to work around a wide receiving core that has injury. Like when you're trying to work around that many issues, then you get to trouble. So it is important to evaluate these players when they're out there playing in the preseason, but you always got to take it with a grain of salt, because how they're used in the preseason is not likely to be how they're used in the regular season in most cases. And it's why you can get somebody who can have an electric preseason like DTR. They play in the regular season, and even the weeks where he did have prep doesn't look anything close to what he did in the preseason. There's level of competition to consider. There's level of complexity to consider. There's the type of game plan that you can get away with in the preseason that you're not going to go in with in the regular season. It's just important to keep in mind that the preseason is not a one-to-one translation of what's going to happen in the regular season. And often you can window dress injury in the regular season much better than you would in the preseason. So, you know, it's kind of like that tag that it's on your like rear view mirror. Objects are closer than they might appear or further than they might appear. Things aren't always what they seem when you look into the rear view mirror that is the preseason. So always keep that in mind. DK Bebe says, in my opinion, it's not that big of a deal. We saw Baker put up with numbers with Greg Robinson at tackle. This offense is designed to be short to medium, quick passing game, get guys in space. You don't need elite tackle play to win with that. And judging by the roster, if not having a left tackle is holding it back, then this team has no business mentioning Super Bowl or deep playoff run. They might look to add someone serviceable as jet insurance, but some fans think we need Trent Williams levels of play. Some things I agree with in here, some things I don't. The things I agree with is people acting as if Jed Wills is putting Jed Wills out there at left tackle is like malpractice. I think you are correct. You do not need Trent Williams to run the Browns offense. Now, I don't think the Browns offense is going to be as short strike as it was a few years ago or last year. I think they're going to try to attack downfield more often, and they're going to be in more 5-0 protection, which means man empty, no help protections, which is going to put these tackles on a little bit of an island. And I do worry about that with Jed because sometimes I think that he struggles when he sees a lot of stunts and twists, and you're going to see a lot of stunts and twists when you run 5-0 protections. That being said, it's still something the Browns can work around. And this goes back to something I was talking about earlier in the offseason. The Browns can have issues. Every team has issues. It's just when it's your team that has an issue, you see every single way that could tear your team down. Case in point, not a lot of people who are saying the Browns left tackle situation is going to doom them are saying the same thing about the Baltimore Ravens, who are replacing 3 offensive linemen, 3 starting offensive linemen from last year. They're replacing them. Like, I see Browns fans already putting us a tier below them because of Jed Wills, who's a starter and was a starter last year. But Baltimore loses 3 offensive line. We don't even think about that because we're not overthinking the problem for Baltimore. But for Cleveland, since we love the Browns, we tend to overthink it. You can have a problem. You can have a player at a position who's just okay, and you can still achieve a lot. I agree with that. Thank you for the comment. The next one comes from Harmless Guppy, who says this: bring Joe out of retirement. And I just wanted to pull this up because I think this is the latest why not get Joe Thomas back comment whenever the Browns have had a left tackle issue ever, which tells me Joe Thomas has finally been successful in convincing people that he is retired. Now, I don't know how this continued because I remember when Joe Thomas retired for like the first couple of years, every time the Browns had an issue at left tackle, they'd ask Joe if he'd come back, and Joe would do the song and dance and act like he'd be interested or he'd love to come back, but he wasn't coming back. He lost like 200 pounds instantly the second he announced that he retired. He was never coming back. But it wouldn't stop us from asking this question. Honorable mention, nobody's mentioned Phil Dawson all season. It's good stuff here. We're finally moving on from the past. But it is interesting to me that we went this long without somebody mentioning Joe Thomas coming out of retirement. And honestly, don't even think the guy was serious. And you think I'm joking. Articles were written about will Joe Thomas come back by like actual writers. It's insane. The Browns have rich people problem, the comment that I got in this video. Unfortunately, Quincy, with being a Browns fan most of my life in expansion, the Browns have not been consistently good, and I believe it conditions the fan base to expect the worst. My hopes is having stable management has come true. This will be a year where we stack winning seasons. Here's my hot take on this. I think the Browns could be as good as the Kansas City Chiefs are, and you're still going to have fans who react like this. I don't think fans are reacting this negatively or this reactionarily because of anything that surrounds the history of the team. It's easy to believe that, but this is not just something that's happening with the Browns. This is something that's happening a lot with a lot of other teams. I think this has everything to do with the media environments and how reactionary a lot of the media apparatuses that surround NFL teams have gotten over the last few years. There's no secret. If you want to get a bunch of people to watch some of your stuff on whatever team you talk about, all you got to do is have the most reactionary take that you can have, and people will watch it, right? And I think that being the case across like every social media platform, across every content distribution platform creates an effect where if you're just a degular Browns fan who wants to hear some Browns talk, you're constantly being funneled by these algorithms, the most reactionary takes you can get about the Browns. And if you hear these reactionary takes without any other context around it, you're going to believe it. You're going to buy in, and you're going to start reacting in that same way. I think this has more to do with how social media works, more to do with how the media works social media, and more to do with that whole thing and that whole ecosystem more than it has to do with whatever the Browns' history has been. I don't think this is like a lot of the people acting like this haven't even been around for like 20 years, right? Like these are people, like some of these people who are reacting like this have only been Browns fans since 2018. Like they don't know 20 years of misery, right? Like it's not every Browns fan. It's like some of us know it, but a lot of these fans have come around since 2018 and like they're reacting off of stuff that they see on the internet. So I think it's more to do with that than like trauma we carry as Browns fans because we watched a team lose. Not to dismiss it, just saying if you think the Browns being good is going to stop people from saying dumb stuff about the Browns even when they're Browns fans. I've seen the comment sections in Kansas City Chiefs videos of people who make great stuff about the Kansas City Chiefs. Winning is not going to solve that problem. That problem is bigger than wins and losses. Like there are just some wild takes being floated around to regular folk out there and pushed by these algorithms that it's doing damage to the discourse for sure. Max Al Dojo says this: good sanity check, Q. Many are so used to duct tape and are bailing wire teams. I'm pretty sure I butchered that phrase. My bad. They don't know what they do with them, what to do with themselves with a relatively stacked team. Let's take a deep breath, relax, enjoy the ride. Yeah, I mean, I think that's also part of it, right? Like the other commenter mentioned, where people are used to, oh, if one thing sounds like it's going wrong with the Browns, that's it. The season's over. But think about it. How do we get to the point to where we all watched last year everything possible go wrong for the Cleveland Browns? They still went 11-6. And we're sitting here not more than like 6 months later with the same exact team. And people are worried about one or two things going wrong, ruining the season. It's not because of the history. The history should tell you, oh, this team, they should be fine if something goes wrong. It's not the history, I think. I think it's a whole summer or a whole year of being fed crazy take after crazy take. And it works both ways. Sometimes the algorithm's going to feed people the most positive, insane, the Browns are going to sweep to the Super Bowl, crazy type takes when it's going good. And those are going to be the things that are going to win. And then when things, slightly kind of take a little bit of a turn, they're going to funnel you back the most. And it just keeps us swaying left and right. And you just end up feeling motion sick. So my best word of advice, if you want to avoid this, because we're all Browns fans, we all use the internet, and the solution isn't to not use the internet or not to watch stuff about the Browns. I would hope, it's kind of my whole livelihood. But I think the solution is really keep an inventory of where it is that you heard something. If you heard something crazy about the Browns and that they're going to stink, remember where you heard it. Remember who it is that told you what you heard, and ask yourself, is this source sufficient enough for me to lose my mind about this right now. Right? You got to fact check yourself. You got to source check yourself, right? Whenever you get into a thing, you're like, oh, we don't even have this and that. Who told you that? Double check it. Ask yourself, would I be freaking out if I kept that in mind, where this feeling came from, where this take came from? Something to consider, right? You just got to be more mindful. Well, not mindful, but you got to be more aware of who's saying what and how you feel about the things that person says and how strongly you've really evaluated what that person says in their relationship to the truth or reality. But that's really it. The next video we taking comments from why the vibes don't feel right with the Browns. Mastered said, I think for me, it's massive nervous energy on Deshaun Watson. And the offensive line has not been good in practices or preseason games. There doesn't seem to be an answer. At least it's being shared. I think the answer for the offensive line is simply being healthy. I can understand why an offensive line also on the left side that's going to play Joe Bitonio limited in joint practices, did not have their starting left tackle in Jed Wills, would not look good in a joint practice. So got to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. It is frustrating that you can't see this Browns team with all their starters and all their glory till week 1. But the hope is that you do get to see this Browns team with all their starters and all their glory in week 1. So that's that part. And the nervous energy on Deshaun Watson. Hey, man, even if Deshaun played in the preseason, even if Deshaun played amazing in the preseason, Deshaun could have put up the best preseason numbers of any quarterback in the NFL. And I'm saying this is somebody who thinks Deshaun should play in the preseason if he can. So I'm not anti Deshaun Watson playing in the preseason or one of those guys he's got nothing to prove or he's got nothing to show. I think he needs to get in there for more of the less of the stats-based stuff, but more of the process stuff, right? How he gets stuff in from the sideline, that kind of stuff. He hasn't been in the stadium and taken a play call with Ken Dorsey in that process yet. That's why I wanted Deshaun to play. He needs those kind of reps. But even if Deshaun played a bunch in the preseason and balled out all in the preseason, we would still be very nervous about Deshaun Watson. Because the question for Deshaun Watson ultimately isn't about the preseason. And this is also something that I got to be real with. Even if Deshaun Watson balls out during the season, it'll feel good for a couple of weeks. But we still going to be nervous about it. Because the question with Deshaun Watson isn't, can he be great in the preseason? It's not even, can he be great in the regular season? The ultimate question with Deshaun Watson is, can he be great in the postseason? So we're just going to, it's going to be progressive levels of being some level of nervous about if Deshaun Watson can perform. I would like to remind folk that nervousness is a much better place to be in than hopelessness, like when you start in Colt McCoy and a roster that don't look that different from Colt McCoy. I'm not saying that. When I say that, I'm saying a roster that's pretty mediocre. No disrespect to Colt McCoy, but those are some mediocre teams. You don't want to be there, right? So the fact that we are nervous, the fact that we are worried, the fact that we have this kind of energy tells us that the Browns have a lot of potential as well. Because you wouldn't be nervous if you didn't think this team had potential. You're nervous because you think that this team can achieve a lot. And you're worried about if they can achieve all that they can achieve. Which is fair. But nerves don't always have to be a bad thing, right? I feel like nerves are a good thing. You want to be nervous about your team. if you're not nervous about your team, you're either overconfident or you don't got a team worth worrying about. Next comment comes from Small, who says the AFC North is 1-11 in the preseason, worst division in football. Not even related to anything in the video. I just wanted to add that comment in there because, like, that's just an amazing piece of perspective right there. The AFC North is 1-11 in the preseason. 1-11. That's wild. We know this division's good. And I think the Bengals played Joe Burrow. The Ravens never played Lamar Jackson, like, ever. Like, I don't think they've played Lamar Jackson since like 2018 in the preseason. And somebody fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure since the pandemic, my man ain't played in the preseason. And then, well, Pittsburgh has played their starters a lot in the preseason, actually. So, yeah. It's interesting, right? It's interesting, like, how much does it matter? Well, the win-loss results really don't matter. We know it don't matter, right? Nobody's debating if wins and losses in the preseason matter. The question is, does how you look individually in the preseason, does that matter? And that could be on various degrees, because remember, the Pittsburgh Steelers were the all preseason team last year. They were winning in the preseason, and their starters looked amazing in the preseason. They ended up being pretty bad offensively. Just got to take the preseason with a massive grain of salt. Sometimes it translates. A lot of times it doesn't. It's not 1-to-1. You just got to take it with like that, you know. Bubble players that the Browns could steal. Roadhouse says, I agree mostly with your takes, but the reasoning on why the Browns should depend on Miles Harden, because he's a rookie and a 6th-round pick. But I think it should be less about where they're drafted and more on their performance. Like Ika, example of 3rd-round pick, he doesn't take the roster. Expert feeling she shouldn't belong on the roster. Yeah, I generally agree with this. And when I say the Browns shouldn't play Miles Harden because he's a rookie 6th-round pick, I'm not saying just because he was picked in the 6th round he shouldn't play. What I am saying is Miles Harden has not shown himself to be above that label of a rookie 6th-round pick. The same way I'm not going to say the Browns should play Siaki Ika because he's a 3rd-round pick, because Siaki Ika on the other end of the spectrum has played himself out of being that 3rd-round pick, or the label of being a 3rd-round pick. If you want to see a player who's played themselves positively out of that 3rd-round pick label, Martin Emerson. Thought he should play right away, immediately, because it was obvious when you watched him. He was better than most 3rd-round picks. When you watch Miles Harden, looks like a 6th-round pick. Looks like a guy transitioning from the FCS to the NFL, which is a difficult transition. Like FCS football, that's very far away from the NFL. So he has a long transition ahead of him. He should not be expected to play, and the Browns shouldn't put him in a position to play because he's got a lot to learn. Talented player, could be a good player someday, but not a good player right now as far as the NFL standard goes. And if he does touch the field, they're going to abuse him because he's young and he is super inexperienced. So that's why I wouldn't play him. But the label of rookie 6th-round pick, if it still fits, it still fits, right? It only matters if that player has demonstrated themselves, like Ika, like you said, to be worse than that label or better than that label. Does that label start to not matter in the way that you want it to? But if that label fits like Miles Harden's does, like I know he made a couple of plays in like joint practice and a couple of plays in the preseason, but for the most part, when you look at the tape, looks like a 6th-round pick that has some potential, but I wouldn't play a ton. That's why I'm not really pushing for him to play a ton. But that's it for Hot Takes. Appreciate the comments. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.